Okay, so if we could now move to the main business. Colleagues first, can I ask if there are any declarations of interest? Pecuniary interest? No? Okay, thank you. Could I ask you to approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 6th of February? Yep, thank you very much. Okay, now the first main item we have on the agenda is improving the key guarantees. The way this is going to run is I'm going to ask Councillor Matthew Bennett, who is the lead for housing, to introduce the item. I will then ask the relevant officer, Rachel Sharp, if she has any additional information she wants to add to that summary. I then have 7 speakers who have indicated that they want to speak this evening. I will take all of the 7 before I ask if there are questions or comments from my Cabinet colleagues, because all of the Cabinet have read the papers and have asked questions in advance that they wanted any clarification on. So I will ask the 7 speakers in 2 batches to come up to the table, and if I could ask you to keep your contributions to 2 minutes. I will ask Cabinet to also keep their contributions concise, because we do have 4 items to get through, and we do need to leave the meeting at 7 o'clock. So I would ask if everybody be brief. It will of course help if everybody is able to remain respectful of everyone's contributions. I know passions are running high on some of these issues, but I think if we can hear one another, it will help to assist the meeting and will mean that we will able to get answers and clarifications on any points that are raised. So I will ask Matthew first, and then Rachel if she's got any additional comments, and then in my first batch of speakers I have Shemi, Lyra. Are you here, Shemi? Yep, Shemi, Galinda. I think I saw Galinda come in. Petra Abam. No, okay, Petra, sorry, and Tom Keane. No, okay. Okay, well I will ask those 3 people if they can come up first, but I will start with Matthew. So Matthew, if I could ask you to introduce the report. Thank you. Sorry? Okay. Good. Not normally. I normally ask you to come up after. Sorry if I wasn't clear, but I'm not really that fussed. But Matthew, if you start.
Thank you very much, Lib, and good evening, everybody. This is a report to improve the key guarantees to our residents involved in estate regeneration. This report's come about after a lengthy process of consultation and engagement to get us to this point. We're trying to combine the ambition of building more social housing for local families and better homes for our existing tenants, alongside being fair to our existing residents going through estate regeneration. We need to balance as well, within those 3 groups, the needs and aspirations of our tenants against our leaseholders and our future residents. And we have to do this from one pot of money and balance out those competing demands. First of all, on any estate regeneration carried out by this council in Lambeth, there will be no loss of social housing. We promise a new home on a rebuilt estate to any resident who wants to stay. And then as we move through rebuilding, the new estates will be designed and built around the needs of our residents and their aspirations for a better place to live. And to do this, we're establishing Homes for Lambeth as a not-for-profit, council-owned, council-controlled development company, which will also set itself up as a housing association to provide more social housing for people in this borough. In developing the key guarantees, we co-produced the Estate Regeneration Principles in 2015 in work led by my colleague Councillor Jane Pickard, with representatives from tenants and leaseholder groups across Lambeth, and widely discussed at tenants and leaseholder councils. These were taken to Cabinet as a draft in summer 2015 and then independently reviewed by TPAS, the Tenant Participation Advisory Service, who are a well-respected independent organisation representing, as the name suggests, tenants. They reported back in early 2016 that the draft offer was a very good offer to our residents, compared very well to the offer from other boroughs, but they also recommended further improvements which we've accepted and incorporated. We also listened to the feedback from residents throughout 2016 on the estate regeneration estates, particularly around equity shares for leaseholders in the shared ownership offers, all of which we accepted and incorporated in improving this offer. The consultation booklets with both the headline principles and the bullet point detailed mechanisms are part of this Cabinet paper in the appendices. What Cabinet is being asked today is to note the consultation, the officers' responses in Appendix B on the requests for alterations or on clarifications for what was being proposed, and to approve both those headlines and the details as set out in the consultation and in Appendix B. I know from feedback from residents, particularly on the Central Hill estate earlier this week, that the way that this has been presented, although it was an attempt to try and offer more clarity and transparency about what had been requested and what was being proposed, has caused some confusion, for which I take responsibility, and I would like to apologise for the confusion caused.
Sorry, please, we're only going to get through this if we can hear one another, so if we could, there are some contributions from the floor that have already been pre-registered. If we could let Matthew get through the introduction, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. To be clear, nothing in the improved key guarantees has been watered down from what was consulted on in the autumn, nothing has been taken away, and nothing has been reduced. But to provide more reassurance, I would like to amend the Cabinet report to make this even clearer. And the proposed amendment that I am moving is at recommendation 4 on page 6, to delete that recommendation entirely and to replace it with new recommendation 4, to delegate to the Cabinet Member for Housing and the Strategic Director for Neighbourhoods and Growth the authority to adapt the mechanisms of the key guarantees to residents where required to do so by changes to government legislation or regulation. But any substantive change to the key guarantees will require a further Cabinet decision subject to consultation. For our tenants in adopting the key guarantees, the Council will be committing to offering tenants two main choices about their future home. First, for tenants who want to move now and leave their estate and move to a new home, they will be given Band A status on Lambeth's choice-based letting scheme and the choice of bidding for a new home elsewhere in the borough. Either an existing council home, which of course comes with an existing secure tenancy along with the right to buy, or an existing housing association property, which as a housing association would come with an assured tenancy, and this will be entirely the tenant's choice of which home they choose. For tenants who want to stay on their estate, the Council will build them a new home, with enough bedrooms to meet their family's needs, built larger to modern, warmer, better insulated standards, and with any adaptations needed to address their assessed disability needs. This would come with a new assured lifetime tenancy, with the same succession rights as exist in their current tenancies and rents set according to the same government formula as all other council rents in the borough. This will not come with a statutory right to buy, but as part of the consultation on the tenancy agreement, we will consult with our tenants about the ability to buy their homes and do that later this year. But on the issue of right to buy, and this administration does support tenants across the borough who want to buy their home, we oppose the government's rules on how we can use the money. The Conservative Minister for Housing says that right to buy is only justified if one-for-one replacement of homes happens. Across the country, we are nowhere close to that one-for-one replacement because of rules and obstacles placed in our way by the Conservative government. We are committed to consulting on this issue as an administration with an open mind, but not an empty head. We need more social housing in Lambeth. We need more social housing in Lambeth, and we need a secure stock of those homes to support local families to be able to stay in Lambeth. And we know that the impact that we will have on the stock of council homes in this borough when the Conservative government introduces the forced sale of council homes on the open market to support the right to buy in housing associations from 2018. Across all the options for tenants, they will receive financial compensation. Home loss currently set at £5,800 and compensation to cover the cost of moving of up to £3,000. I also know that residents are concerned that rents in the new homes will be higher, and they almost certainly will be. But we will phase any difference in rents in over 5 years so there is no sudden cliff edge. And with our new council homes that have just been completed on Ackerman Road, we have a clear example of how these new rents work. The rents in those new council homes on Ackerman Road have been set using exactly the same formula as will be used on estate regeneration. And in the new family-sized homes, compared to the average rent for an existing council home with the same number of bedrooms, the weekly rent would increase by about £2 each year for 5 years. There will be no sudden hike in rents because we are phasing them in. and these new homes will be far better insulated. We estimate that the average heating bills in the new council homes we've just completed will be just £5 a month. For leaseholders, we've been committed throughout to a fairer and more comprehensive set of offers than we've seen elsewhere. The offers for leaseholders mean that everyone who wants to stay living on the estate will have a full range of options to allow them to do so. First, a full independent market valuation of their home, the ability to appoint a second valuer of the leaseholder's choice at the council's expense, and for resident homeowners, we will pay 10% above market value, as well as all moving costs, legal fees, mortgage fees, stamp duty, etc. Second, for those who want to stay on the estate rather than move away, we will build them a new home. And there are 4 options to enable leaseholders to remain living on that estate in that new home. Firstly, the ability to buy that new home outright, with or without a mortgage. Secondly, bringing the full value of their existing home, with or without a mortgage, depending whether they have one, to the new property, with rent-free shared ownership to cover the value gap, with nothing extra to pay to the council at all. For residents who can't get a new mortgage, or who can't port their existing mortgage, we will offer again rent-free shared ownership on the value difference between their old home and the new home, and charge shared ownership rent on the value of their previous mortgage, so they can remain homeowners. In all of those cases, the equity retained by the homeowner will go up or down in line with the mortgage. It is a share that remains theirs throughout. And where home ownership isn't possible anymore because of debt or negative equity, we'll explore all options with that homeowner, including providing independent financial advice on their options. And, if at their request, we will work with them to offer them a rented home on the estate, with the rent set at a level affordable for that resident's income. Using all of those 4 options, there is the ability for every single homeowner on every single estate being rebuilt to stay on that estate if they choose to do so. If adopted by Cabinet tonight, officers will pull together the changes and improvements set out both in the main report and the details and clarifications in Appendix B, and reissue the key guarantees as a final and adopted offer to residents. Again, the Cabinet report says this will be done by June, but I know residents want more certainty, and I and Councillor Peck have asked officers to move more quickly to collate and print these final documents and issue them across the 6 estates more quickly. Therefore, to provide again greater certainty, I'd like to amend Recommendation 3 in the Cabinet report to add at the end that those updated documents should be produced and issued no later than May. Taken together, this is a fair and balanced package which I believe is the best in London, that keeps communities together who want to stay together, reflects choice for residents, allows plenty of time for residents to consider which option is best for them before rebuilding starts, and allows the council to build the cost of these key guarantees into the master planning of each rebuilt estate, so that all residents, whether tenants or leaseholders, can have confidence and certainty about their future, and meets our test of fairness and ambition as a council. And I recommend we adopt the report.
Right, thank you very much, Matthew. I think that was very clear. Sorry, can we just minimise those kind of shout-outs, please? Because there are lots of people here who are really trying to listen, because I'm looking at their faces, and it's very difficult if the whole conversation is being interrupted. Rachel, would you like to add anything to Matthew's introduction at this stage? No. Okay. In which case, then, can I move to the 3 registered speakers that I had for the first group, which was Shemi, Galinda, and Petra, please. If you'd like to come forward, it'd be very helpful. Okay. Thank you. Are you happy to go in that order? Shemi, are you happy to kick off? That's great. And if I could remind you, there's lots of people. I'm going to be tough on Cabinet as well in terms of their contributions. And so if you could keep it to 2 minutes, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. Shemi.
Well, I speak as the chair of the TRA on Ellsbury. The chair. Sorry. I speak as the chair of the TRA on Westbury. I'm the serving co-vice chair of the Lambeth Leaseholders Association and interim chair of the Leaseholders Association, as well as the chair of Clapham Leaseholders Association. Given that our chair, Stephen Guide, resigned publicly, citing allegations of bullying and intimidation by specific councillors.
Excuse me, Shemi. I think if you're going to make those kind of allegations, we actually need to respond to them. And I'd rather... No, I am letting him speak, but I don't... Excuse me. I don't think we can leave those to set as they are. So I'm going to ask Alison to respond to those. I'm not going to take that off your 2 minutes, but I would like you to... I think you've made the point that you represent lots of organisations, so if you can then get to the point around key guarantees, that would be helpful.
Chair, I completely understand that, and I make those comments very advisedly, and they're intended. Right. So for the last 2 years... we have...
Right, just to respond to that, allegations were made, they've been investigated, and no finding of any bullying or intimidation has been found by myself. And so, as far as that was a final finding, and so as it stands, there are no outstanding allegations.
We can get to the rest of your contribution.
Right.
Thank you.
So for the last 2 years, we have informed the council at the very highest levels, as you know, through my emails, of the consequential human rights violations as a result of the estate demolition program, which is supervised by Sue Foster and spearheaded by Neil Vaux and Julian Hart. The Secretary of State, Sajid Javid, has stated and ruled that a similar project in Southwark wholesale violates the human rights of the existing residents, especially the elderly, children, and disproportionately minorities who will suffer as a result of the dislocation from the community, the detriment to the education of children, the loss of support from their support network, etc., etc. And I would say that those issues are conspicuously identical to the issues in Lambeth, especially given that the almost 60% of Lambeth is minority and has a lot of historic and socio-economic problems. There's nothing in these key guarantees that appears to address those issues. On or around October 2016, I personally spoke to Sue Foster about this. I followed it up with an email. On or around the 17th of March last week, I followed it up an email. I included you, meaning the council leader. She responded by referring me to Neil Vaux. I responded that it's her responsibility. As I speak, there appears to be no indication of addressing those issues. Going to the specific issues in the key guarantee.
I am going to ask you to be quite brief now, thank you, because otherwise other people won't be able to contribute.
Yes. As far as there's no disclosure of the financial agreements with the developers. There are serious concerns about the governance of Homes for Lambeth, given that Mr. Matthew Bennett appears to suggest that he'll be the chairman, which clearly may indicate a conflict of interest. It is misleading to say that Homes for Lambeth will be 100% owned by Lambeth, given that there were 3 subsidiaries, which include both development and investment, which brings into question of how do you mitigate market failure and how are you going to supervise financial issues. So I'll be very brief. My colleagues are going to jump in here. I'll close by saying this. I would like the record to show that over the last 2.5 years, the residents of Lambeth have been at the receiving end of severe emotional distress as a result of this. No family or human being should be put through this. The record will show that Lambeth, as we speak, as evidenced by Runnymede report, is the most socially and racially unequal borough. The activities of this program undoubtedly add to that. A large section of this Lambeth diverse family is, the perception we have, is of being systematically being dehumanized, displaced, disenfranchised, and exploited by what appears to be a toxic combination of documented incompetence, indifference, impunity, and self-interested predatory developers or practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Shami. I'll take those points after the other two speakers and then ask officers to respond. Galinda, you're next.
Given the short time yet again, I just want to cover 3 points. I'm sure there'll be a lot more points in the call-in on this. But the first of all, Matthew Bennett altered point 4 for approval, the one where he was going to delegate everything to Lambeth officers and put all the detail on the mechanisms, providing absolutely no protection for residents. It's still inadequate because there's no definition of what do you mean by substantive. Who makes the decision whether something is substantive? And I think that substantive measurement should be relative to the impact on the residents, not substantive whether it's an impact for Lambeth. Because it then goes on, I will go through this one from a leaseholder perspective, but the second point is, and I've already raised this with Sean Harris personally, these key guarantees do not go far enough. They do not cover the whole community. You say you want to keep the community together. We have residents who are private rental who have been 7, 10 years within the community. They actually carry out a vital social care assistance. They help their elderly neighbours on a daily basis, and you're giving them zero protection. We have one family on Cressingham Gardens now, 2 adults, 2 children in school. They have now been forced by Lambeth's Regeneration program to leave because they were on the housing waiting list, so supposedly this should have been the case. They have had to move out of London and now living in a caravan. Lambeth's advice to them was, we can't help you until the bailiffs are sent in. In which case, who wants their children to go through a bailiff situation, sitting on the side of the street with their suitcases, waiting for Lambeth to house them on an emergency purpose? It's disgraceful, and you need to consider it. We now have temporary accommodation, and again, they've got 1 week notice. Whole families sitting there, and you're going to kick them out with 1 week's notice with no obligation. Again, you say you want to create certainty, you're creating even more uncertainty. So I really implore you, if you want to keep these communities together as you claim, you need to put guarantees also in place for all the residents, not just a few you're legally obliged to. The third element I'd like to raise is obviously on this lovely word of improved. I think you failed to say improved for Lambeth key guarantees rather than improved for residents. What is actually lacking in the Cabinet report, but we've actually gone and done it, is a side-by-side comparison of what the current key guarantees are, what the consultation key guarantees were, and what you've now got in your Cabinet report. And what's in the Cabinet report now, realistically, only the principles are the things which are solid. As we already know, the mechanisms can change in the future, but that's where all the detail is. But even going through that, if I look at the existing current guarantees for the homeowners, guarantee number 2, the current one, is no longer guaranteed. It can be altered through the mechanism, so that's gone. Key guarantee 3, again, is no longer guaranteed in principle. It's now pushed to downgraded to a mechanism. Guarantee 4, again, is no longer a key guarantee principle. It's now being pushed down to a mechanism. Guarantee 5 is now no longer offered, even though you could if you wanted to think a bit more creatively. Guarantee 6 is no longer in power of the principles and can now push down to mechanism to be altered whenever you like. Guarantee 7 is no longer offered, completely off the table. Guarantee 8, again, is no longer offered as a guarantee. It's now being demoted down to a mechanism. Same with guarantee 9. Guarantee 10, again, demoted down to a mechanism. Guarantee 13 is being weakened in Guarantee 3. So I'd like to know where the improvements are when all these guarantees are now off the table for the homeowners.
Thank you
can I
for
just
keeping
say,
that brief and highlighting
this
those
was
three
brief. I
comments.
could go on into each one, but this idea we have gone ad nauseum with officers and said for the homeowners, none of these options are affordable for the majority. And we've asked you countless times, sit down, do the numbers. We've done the numbers for you, and there are residents, many of them, homeowners, marginal homeowners, who are going to be homeless. And can I just say, you want to create certainty. To say that you will explore alternatives, what does that tell people? You will be homeless, and we will explore, and if you can't find anything, you're on the street living on sofas. Now, I'm sorry, that is
Belinda,
unacceptable.
I think you've made the point very eloquently. I'm now going to ask Petra if she wants to have her 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to just continue on the same path as Belinda, and my main issue is, again, the improved offer. I think for the last, we've had a few drafts, we've had different versions of the key guarantees, and again, I reiterate the fact that every single key guarantee has got substantially worse for the residents. For example, taking Guarantee 8 as a specific was the offer to homeowners for their leaseholders, and if I would like to read out here, it says initially in the draft it was one automatic succession would be allowed for a spouse, civil partner or family member nominated by the homeowner, which has now, after 3 revisions, been changed to the council will only allow people to pass it on to anyone that's been living with them for a year in the same property and is a family member, a spouse or a civil partner. And to me that's discriminatory. I mean, basically the whole offer is completely discriminatory because it takes into account only people that have families. So if you don't have a family, you can no longer leave your property to anyone, and also you have to have had someone living with you for a year to be able to leave your property to them. And when this was brought up in the questions, I think the answer was that basically people are being subsidised. And so because they're subsidised, it's not fair to let anyone else benefit. So I don't understand how everyone having to pay more means they're being subsidised. And also the council is saying that they're considering potentially letting people leave their property to somebody else, but the person that it was left to would have to pay rent on a property that the person that left it to them already owned. And they also have to be a spouse, a family member, or a civil partner. So to me, that was bad enough to start with, but it's now even worse in 3 iterations. And in every consultation we've had, this has been addressed, and it's just been made worse and worse, which just goes to show the point that was raised earlier, that nowhere does the consultations actually seem to feed back to what the residents wanted. It seems to be coming from what Lambeth wants, and none of our actual issues have been taken into account. Thank you.
For keeping that brief. Okay, there's a lot of points raised there. Rachel and Sue, are you responding to those, or is it Rachel and Julian? Yeah, you're going to need a microphone and need somewhere to sit, actually, aren't you, I think?
We do it after all the speakers.
Oh, we're going to do it after all the speakers, and then that gives you an opportunity. Okay, fine. Well, I am noting down what has been said, so that's fine. All right, well, if I could thank you very much for those 3 contributions. I've then got in the next 3, Andy Plant. Sorry, here or? Oh, here, hi, hello, sorry. Mariana. Mariana Nwagbosu, yep, hi, and Anne Cooper. Yeah, brilliant. If the 3 of you would like to come up to the front, that's great. Thank you. Sorry, Andy, if you'd like to go first. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett used the word choose and choice a lot in his preamble. In your tenant key guarantee number 1, you use the word choose a lot. This should state that tenants are required to choose an option, because That's what it is. You can either choose to lose tenant rights or to move away from the estate. These are options that many tenants do not want and have not asked for, and have made clear over and again are an unwelcome imposition. Forcing tenants to comply, do this or lose your home, doesn't denote choice, it denotes coercion. Tenant Guarantee 2 promises, where possible, the council will ensure that any aids and adaptations that you may require will be carried out before you move into your new home. You still haven't specified how this will be funded. I asked you in March last year how this will be funded. A year later, I have heard nothing. In your agenda, item 3, section 2.2.4, you're asking that officers be granted flexibility regarding adapting, when necessary, the mechanisms for implementing the key guarantees. Can you guarantee this won't be manipulated by officers? Especially given the loose language you generally use to frame such principles. Cabinet may not care about loosely worded language. Residents do. If the final version of the key guarantees does not match to what the Cabinet are approving tonight, because let's not kid ourselves that most of you have the guts to stand against it, who will pay for that besides the residents? In your timetable for implementation, you mention a contractual right to buy and consultation about it. When will the council be scheduling this consultation? And will the council ensure a higher quality of consultation than what regeneration estates are used to? Lip service paid, cursory attempts at resident engagement, manipulation of resident engagement forums, misrepresentation of residents opposed to regeneration, and plain bad faith. Your own Mr. Hart is on record as observing a great deal of consultation for the purposes of planning is still a very cynical affair. Too bloody right. What about contractual versions of the other tenant rights that we're being coerced to give up? After all, weren't tenants promised that their assured lifetime tenancies would match their secure tenancies as closely as possible? That's another early promise missing from your key guarantees, isn't it? And for utter ridiculousness, Section 9, Organisational Implications, 9.4, Health, states, the key guarantees help to reduce uncertainty around estate regeneration projects and should therefore reduce any stress experienced by those residents on estates experiencing regeneration. This is wishful thinking, not a claim any sensible psychologist would make, even if they were unfamiliar with the council's Humpty Dumpty organisational dynamics. There are too many other stressors in regen besides uncertainty to make the claim viable.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Mariana?
Yeah. Where do I begin? I have written these few words. I'm a council tenant who is living in an overcrowded condition in a place with an office called Neighborhood Office at Headland Road. Early 2000, Clapham Park was ready for registration. Clapham Park Estate, which was then facing regeneration, I was glad to be moved by the council to Cressingham Garden Estate in late 2003 to a home on a secure tenancy. Now, 14 years later, the council is telling me that unless I move again to another Lambeth estate with key guarantees which will allow me to retain my secure tenancy, and that I will have to move to another council estate in order to retain this. The alternative is to accept the new lifetime assured tenancy, which, despite the council boasting, is nowhere near as secure as secured tenancy. A lifetime assured tenancy having no Section 8 and 11 protection is not a good deal for any tenant. Lambeth assured tenancy comes with no right to manage or no right to buy, which Lambeth Council actually boasted that they are supporting TMO. The council principle and mechanism will bring an end to council estates. There are no guarantees that if I move to another estate to preserve my secure tenancy, that the council will not generate that estate also. It is a game to you with few, if any, direct consequences on the lives of councillors and council officers. I'm not alone in thinking, please. I'm not alone in thinking this, as I have spoken to others who have already moved from one estate to another. You talk in your key guarantees for tenants about how a tenant can choose to have a lifetime assured tenancy or retain their secure tenancy by moving. That is not a choice. It is a threat. It is also a coercion, what you call it. Your principle means that demolition of estates for the creation of new home, mostly for market and near market rent, or for private sale to create income, achieving this through your regeneration mechanism. The logical end game is less social housing, with the council gradually thinning its holding through regeneration to develop long-term investment model which generates revenue which can lead or use to build new home. Developing new home across Lambeth into the near future sounds like a great aim. But how much of the new home is much needed social housing? It appears to me that Lambeth is deliberately creating upward demographic change, which in otherwise known as social cleansing. Your key guarantees contain no succession policy for my now adult children. Just a promise that one will be allowed. Allowed means you have your own discretion. There is no like-for-like accommodation, as promised when regeneration was first mentioned. So many broken or ignored promises. Now, my key issue is this. My autistic daughter will be 25 next month. If she refuses to leave her home, can you assure me that she won't be treated like an old 80 years Tony Healy, who was sectioned under mental health and suffered broken limbs when evicted from his home by the council's agents? What specific guarantees have you been written to stop these sort of things happening? The council has done very little work regarding vulnerable residents on Cressingham Gardens, relying on an out-of-date equalities impact assessment from 2014-2015, which contained no detail itself. The council principles are theoretical, and they have no moral compass in their mechanisms, which can be varied. It will by council's officers. Due to Brexit and other factors, living costs keep increasing. Is there any mechanism or principle that makes such that after 5 years of phased rent increase, the key guarantee keeps rent at council level? This, of course, cannot be guaranteed. As today, what is home for Lambeth may become metropolitan housing or London Quadrant housing tomorrow. Regardless of promises and reassurance to residents by the council, I remember when Clapham Park Home later became metropolitan housing. The council are not listening to its residents. Leap back, tell us that you are listening. But she only hears the rattle of coins in the council coffer. Bear in mind that the time is coming when each Labour councillors will have to justify their seat on the council to the electorate. Please bring the residents with you. Listen to the residents or pay the price. The council avoid telling us the fact, forcing us to find them ourselves or to find the truth through freedom of information requests. The threat of residents as fools.
Mariana,
yet mysteriously,
Mariana, I've been quite a lot of time.
my vote.
Start winding up,
It's
please.
time you work for it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm so sad. Shaking.
Okay, and last contributor, Anne Cooper, please.
Okay, I don't think I'm as well prepared as my fellow residents. My name's Anne Cooper. I'm also a tenant on Cressingham Gardens estate, and I want to talk about one particular issue, but that issue has already been flagged up by Andy when he talked about the stress that tenants feel, by Shemi when he talked about the emotional distress, and also by Mariana and the very specific case of her daughter. And I may be a little behind with, the developments that there's been over the key guarantee, so I'm referring back to a document which may now be out of date. But I know at the start of this document, it says, no one at the council underestimates the potential distress that regeneration generating an estate could cause to residents, and intends to reduce that as much as possible. And my concern is this, that is not happening. It's not even beginning to happen. So it's not that it's not happening well, it's not happening at all. And I think there is a huge problem here. There is no mention in any of these key guarantees of any provision for people with mental health needs. Now, there is under point 5 in my document, which may be different to what you have in front of you, some reference to the council will provide you with the help to enable your move, with additional support offered to you if you have special needs or a disability. But I'd like to ask, does that include mental health conditions? I consider them to be a disability. I'm a bipolar adult, I experience it. It's extremely disabling. I don't want to make this all about me, but following the decision to regenerate this Cressingham Gardens estate, I had 12 months of the most severe anxiety and depression that I've never experienced before in my life. Panic attacks, insomnia, it was absolute mental torture. Now, I know that I'm not the only one on the estate that is suffering in this way. We've had various psychotic episodes. There's a lot of lower level anxiety already because of the uncertainty that this process has produced. And my point here really is that so far there is nothing today that I've heard, and there is nothing in this document which reduces that that reduces that uncertainty. And I think that has to be absolute priority, because we talk about 1 in 4 in this society of people experiencing mental health problems. I suspect on a regenerated estate, we're going down to 1 in 3, 1 in 2. Anxiety is extremely disabling. People lose their jobs. That is what we are facing because of these decisions, because people are forced to make choices that they never wanted to make. I just want to add to this. Every time I've been at a cabinet meeting, there's been a head of wellbeing here, and I'm not sure quite who that is, and if that person is here tonight. Why isn't the head of wellbeing working with the Regen team? I've got a proposal. I feel that a document needs to be created which basically describes the sort of mental health conditions, because people experience it for the first time won't know what they're experiencing. That also provides the services that are available. There are a number of services in the borough. There is Mind, there is Look Ahead, which is actually a council-run service. There's Mosaic Clubhouse, there's Certitude. And I would say this, if the council aren't prepared to create that document and deliver it door to door to every single home of every person that's undergoing this extremely distressing experience, and I don't think, I don't think you recognise how distressing it is. I really don't. Otherwise, you'd have done this by now. And what I would say is, if you don't do it, we will, and we'll make it absolutely clear that you refuse to do it, and that we know that we're doing it for our communities, because our elected representatives don't care enough about us to actually give us the support we need, the information we need to look after our own well-being. Someone mentioned earlier that this process is about what Lambeth want, and personally I agree with that, and I think what this process should be about is what people need. It's not what we want, it's what we need. We've already made it clear. We've spent 3 years, 4 years, 5 years saying we don't want this. So if you're not prepared to listen to that, listen to what we need.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and you may say you hadn't prepared that, but it was very eloquent in terms of the way you described how you felt, so appreciated, and I will ask the Head of Wellbeing to respond to that particular proposal, which I think is a valuable one. Okay, if I could ask some of the officers to come to the table and to respond to some of the points that have been raised before I open it up to Cabinet colleagues. Okay. Again, I think everybody has been listened to really respectfully, and it would be helpful if we could maintain that so that people can hear answers to very legitimate questions that have been asked. I had, first of all, I think we had from Shemi issues around the Southwark judgment, and in particular also drawing out issues around equality and equality impact assessment. If somebody could touch on that. I think there's a whole piece around whether guarantees are improvements, whether guarantees have got enough detail in them, and specifically I heard whether tenants still had security in terms of tenure, and clarification around succession as well. I think Galinda raised, in amongst many points, but also raised private renters and an offer around private renters. And also, I think Mr. Plant raised the contractual right to buy issue. So if we can touch on those, as well as the last point which was raised around health, mental health support and certainty, and how the council could respond to that. Is that okay? Who's leading off? Neil, you are. Okay, thanks.
Starting with Southwark and the Ellsbury ruling, I think it's worth just stating that Southwark's in a very different situation to Lambeth in terms of... Lambeth is in a very different situation when compared to Southwark. So we've carefully reviewed the ruling on the Ellsbury decision when drafting the key guarantees for Lambeth, and I think that we're confident that we have a very good offer for residents, and one which is fair, and one which addresses some of the weaknesses that were identified in the Southwark case. I think in particular Lambeth is offering an independent valuation which should ensure that homeowners are offered market value for their properties. And
Contrast to Southwark.
they had they did their valuations internally.
Okay, because I think the point Shemi was raising was very specific in terms of comparison.
Yeah. And then I think the process of agreeing these draft key guarantees is that they have been benchmarked against other local authorities, against other housing associations, and that's been done by an independent organisation, and that report is publicly available, and it shows that Lambeth is not only meeting its legal obligations for tenants and for homeowners, but in many cases it's going above and beyond what is necessary.
There is questions around equality, but guarantees was the second one that I picked up in particular.
So I was just going to pick up on the equalities. In the Key Guarantees report, it sets out clearly the process that we're going to follow in terms of... So I'm Julian Hart, State Regeneration Programme Manager. In the Key Guarantees report, it sets out clearly the process that we're going to be using in relation to equalities across the whole programme. For the equalities impacts, that there was a clear process set out. We provided baselines at this moment in time for each of the estates as we've gone through the process of making decisions on whether or not estate regeneration would take place. This is based on housing need assessment surveys and various other information that we've been able to collate in relation to the residents on an estate. However, as we go forwards, we'll be collecting more and more information about people's circumstances. We'll be carrying out, and we've already started carrying out on the leading estates, detailed housing needs assessments, working through with people exactly what their circumstances are and what their needs are. And as we go through that process, it enables us to pick up a lot more information about people, and so at key stages along the way we will then repeat the equalities impact assessment process to inform the process that we're going through, informing master planning, informing the next stages and so on.
If it's you continuing guarantees, I think.
So in relation to the key guarantees, the booklets that we provided as the start of the consultation process back in September set out clearly the improvements that we had made to the key guarantees that had originally been adopted back in July 2015. We've set out in this consultation process now through Appendix B, again, the further changes that we are making on the back of the consultation process. We will then, obviously, as we've said, we will then turn those into revised booklets that we will issue by, as Matthew's now stated, the end of May, to make sure people understand exactly what their key guarantees are, and there will be supporting literature underneath those key booklets.
Rachel?
Yes, just to pick up on that last point, I think it was, it's Rachel Sharp here, Andy mentioned the issue of paying for adaptations. That was a specific issue that was raised with us. We listened to what people were saying, and if you look at Appendix 2 in the pack, I think it's page 48, we do make it clear that we are not expecting people to pay for their adaptations. That was something that was raised with us. So we have absolutely picked that up. In more general terms, in terms of the position of people who are vulnerable on the estate for whatever reason, we are very aware of that, and I take the points that Anne in particular made on that, and I thought the suggestion about providing additional advice and support and sources of advice and support to people, particularly people who are suffering with mental health difficulties during this difficult time, is a really good suggestion, and we'd be really happy to pick that up with the Strategic Director of Adults and Health to make sure we can do that. One of the advantages of going around now and talking to people and starting to assess people's needs, their housing needs, is we will pick up a lot of information that we just don't have at the moment about people's particular needs, and I'm very keen that we make sure that we put it in at an early stage the help and support people will need, not just now, but going forward during the process of redevelopment and indeed in getting people the new homes they need. So we will take any suggestions on that and look at things really carefully. That was a very helpful one.
Contractual right to buy. I think that was another point. If somebody could address that, please.
I think there were quite a few questions that tied into future tenancies on regeneration estates. So just to clarify, we'll be consulting on the tenancy agreements for Homes for Lambeth tenants starting in June, and that will be a process that involves residents looking at the tenancies that HFL will be offering, and there will be a formal consultation process around that. But we are looking at matching it as closely as possible to the secure tenancy. Things like succession rights will completely mirror tenants' existing tenancy documents, and as part of that consultation we'll be consulting on whether to offer the contractual right to buy.
Sorry, I apologise. Colleagues, can I ask if there are other questions or points that people want to raise? No, Shami, you've had your go. This is colleagues for Cabinet colleagues. Councillor, I saw Councillor Jane Edbrook, Councillor Jane Pickard and Councillor Jenny Brathwaite first. And can I, contributors have by and large stuck to 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes. If you could do the same. Thank you.
Sorry, it's a slight reiteration, but Neil, you addressed Shemi's point earlier on the Southwark judgment. So just to reiterate, we are confident that we have addressed the concerns of the Secretary of State and that our offer is sufficiently better that actually we wouldn't have the same concerns were this to happen to us.
Sorry, in the same way I'm going to take all the questions and then ask you to respond. Jane Pickard.
Can I quickly say something political before asking my question? I just wanted to make the point, first of all, that I think we all really do understand the emotions of people who are in this position. I do realise that losing your home is a very emotional business. I have every sympathy with people who face being moved out of their home, so I do understand why people feel upset about it. But
excuse me. I think everybody's entitled to their experience and to be able to express it.
I just want to say that I found it a bit surprising that some people on the political left have adopted this as a cause. Yeah, I do, because the fact is the council has opted for estate regeneration as a means of providing more social housing and as a way of improving social housing.
Excuse me, can we please just keep it respectful? Jane, if you can maybe begin to move towards a question rather than a statement, that would also be helpful.
No, I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of supporting the push for more social housing. I am not. The right to buy without the means to replace what we've got, the right to buy without the means to replace what we've got has actually reduced social housing by around 1/3, I believe, in this area. It's one of the contributors to the London housing crisis. Gentrification is chasing people out of London. I completely agree with the points made about gentrification. And the way to counter this is to ensure we do provide housing that people can afford. Providing more and better housing for people on low and middle income seems to me the right thing for a Labour council to do. In an overcrowded borough, in an era of austerity, unfortunately, estate regeneration is necessary to free up the land to do this. And how we protect the interests of existing residents is key, which brings me back to my question. I just wanted to make that point. The question is, that I was the person, as Deputy Cabinet Member to Matthew in 2014, that started the discussions on the key guarantees. I think they're really important. But I was wondering if officers could set out what further consultation happened after I moved from housing in early 2015. What was the continued consultation process and what changes were made as a result? I'm afraid I rather agree with Galinda. I don't think it's completely clear, where we were then and where we are now. I've looked at the independent advisor reports and some of the comments made by people, but it really would be helpful to have a summary of key points.
Thank you very much. Jenny, if you could be brief, and
I'll try.
Then I saw Jackie.
Chair, thank you so much. I'm just going to refer to the report, which actually states, and I quote, existing resident leaseholders and freeholders will also be offered a new home on the estate with a range of options to make remaining a homeowner affordable to them, with nothing extra to pay to the council, so that the existing community can stay together. My question is, can you set out how that would work for those residents who cannot transfer their existing mortgage and because of their situation or income aren't able to get a new one?
Thank you. And Jackie? Councillor Meldrum?
Yes. As a councillor responsible for adult social care, I've just got a few points. First of all, the adult social care sector is under tremendous financial pressure nationally due to increasing age of the population and rising costs of services. Now, our approach in Lambeth is to enable people to live at home as long as possible. So, of course, that means quality housing is a really, really key issue. And what I'd like to just check with the officers, if you could explain the process of how you'll actually really consult and engage with households that have a disabled person, somebody with a long-term condition which could be a mental health issue, or has a care package from the council. How we actually involve people in these processes. I see in Guarantee 2 we talk about aids and adaptations, in Key Guarantee 5 we talk about help to move, and 7, perhaps 7 is the most important one, that's about involved in the design. If people with disabilities are actually involved in the design of their own home, there should be less need to add additional adaptations because they should be built into the design of the home in the first place. But in my experience, when you're working with people with disabilities and long-term conditions and so on, you do have to take quite a long, careful time working with them through assessments, planning. You cannot rush this process. But I'd just like to hear what officers' view of working with people like this and really designing homes that will really suit them and make a big difference to their lives and able to have a happy, healthy home.
Thank you, Jackie. And I saw Councillor Sadat.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a question around what Councillor Bennett said at the beginning regarding some of the costs necessarily increasing, say rent. I want reassurance from officers that during the consultation, the assessment that was done, especially around people perhaps on very low pay, not necessarily a housing benefit, but on very low pay, if they do decide to come back to the estate, council tenants in particular, the help will be given, or at least there's a process in place to make sure that they are able to remain on the estate and pay their new dues, rather than it being a prohibitive experience for them and then having to leave, unfortunately.
Those are the last comments. So I think we certainty around Southwark and the judgment there in relation to Ellsbury and the distance between the offer that's on the table here was one. The second was an update on the consultation process in the last, or over really the last period of time. The cost for residents and certainty around that, and I think a series then of questions around sort of engagement and how it will actually work in practice, and in particular when that involves disabled adaptations, but not exclusively, of course. So if could you do that? Brilliant, thank you.
So in terms of Ellsbury, just to assure you, there was a full review of the Ellsbury ruling. We learnt lessons from where Southwark had made mistakes within their offer. That all went into the development of the key guarantees. And again, I think just the independent benchmarking against other local authorities' offers, we're confident that this offer doesn't suffer from the same weaknesses that the Southwark offer did.
So picking up on the consultation, so there was the initial consultation that you were involved in that involved Leasehold Council, Tenants Council and so on back in 2014 and 2015. That fed through to the adoption of the original set of key guarantees in July 2015. From that point forward, we have, because we've been progressing the estate regeneration programme, we've been undertaking feasibility work on different estates. We've continually engaged with the residents on those estates that have been affected by this to sort of continually ask the question of sort of what do you think about the key guarantees, how do you feel about them, what improvements could be made and so on and so forth. So we collected all that information through together so that by the time we got to the summer of 2016, we were able to put together that revised proposed set of key guarantees that went into that booklet. That booklet set out, as I mentioned earlier, the improvements that had been made to those original key guarantees, and then we went through during September and October of last autumn a formal consultation process in which we formally collected responses from everybody across the estates. Everybody had the opportunity to be involved in that process. We carried out events, we carried out drop-ins, we did surveys, etc., to actually get all the information and make sure everybody had the opportunity to feed into that. You'll see the back of the supporting document that goes with the key guarantees report has got a very extensive detailed set out of all that consultation that took place, and that's fed through finally to this report. Now, one of the key improvements that has been made that wasn't in the original set of key guarantees was in relation to this issue of porting mortgages. So in the original key guarantees, it was absolutely silent about what would happen if somebody couldn't move their mortgage or couldn't port their mortgage across. And we were absolutely keen to make sure, and that was one of the big things that we picked up in all the conversations that we had with people, particularly with leaseholders, about what happens if I can't move my mortgage, I can't port my mortgage, and my circumstances change, mortgage rules have changed, etc., etc. And so we looked hard at how we can make that change, and that is why we have option C within the key guarantees, supporting the key guarantees, that sets out what will happen. And basically the process would be that we would start off with offering people option B, whereby we would say, here is the option, you could get this shared ownership option, you can have this percentage of the new property. If they came back to us and said, look, I simply can't port my mortgage, then we would then move to option C, where basically the council would step in effectively as the lender of last resort to pay off their mortgage, and then would offer them a rent which would be worked out on the basis of that cost to the council of supporting them to pay off that mortgage. So they would move from a zero rent option to a rent paying option, but that rent would be linked to the cost it has cost the council to pay off their mortgage.
Thank you very much for that. And then how we're going to work, and including in particular the adaptations point.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as I said earlier, the first point to make about this is for us to find out who needs help, and I think the first step to doing that is actually looking at the residents we have on estates and engaging with them about what their housing needs are and any particular other needs they have. And we're very much aware that we don't want to exclude anyone from the engagement process either, so where particular special advocacy or help is required to engage, we will certainly put that in place. I think, in terms of the design of the new homes, that advocacy could help with people being involved in the general design, but also around design of their own
Again, can we listen to this?
homes.
Because this is an important point, it seems to me, about engagement, and that's something, and that's a point that has cut. That is a point that has been raised several times from the speakers. So if you could talk about that, I think that'd be very helpful.
So the level of support will rather depend on the needs of the individuals and what works for them.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel. We heard that. I don't know who the guy at the back is just shouting, but if you could stop, then we could actually carry on with the business. That'd be very helpful. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think moving to the Cabinet report, and Matthew, can I just get you to clarify again the two amendments in terms of the recommendations that you made, and then I will ask Cabinet colleagues if they're happy to take it.
Thank you, Chair. It was, first of all, to delete the existing recommendation 4 on page 6 and to replace it with delegate to the Cabinet Member for Housing and Strategic Director for Neighbourhoods and Growth the authority to adapt the mechanisms of the key guarantees to residents where required to do so by changes to government legislation or regulation. Any substantive change to key guarantees will require a further Cabinet decision subject to consultation. And then lastly was to add to the end of recommendation 3, also on page 6, to add at the end that these updated documents should be produced and issued no later than May.
Okay. That's important because we need to be absolutely certain what we're agreeing. If you don't want to hear that, that's fine. So, with those two amendments, are Cabinet content to agree the recommendations in the key guarantee document?
Agreed.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for that. If we could now move on to the second item. And the second item is on Central Hill. I will take exactly the same approach to that as the previous item. I have 6 speakers who have registered. So I have, I can see Nicola Curtis and Karen Bennett. Victor Hernandez. Okay, hold on a minute. Sorry, if you just hold on a minute, because I think we'll end up doing the same thing as we did before, if that's all right. So I'll take those 3 speakers, and then I have Betty Adams. Is Betty here? Betty's here as well. Okay, Betty, I'll call you. You don't need to move yet. I'm just checking who's here, but thank you very much. And then I've got Councillor Tim Briggs and I've got Councillor Luke Murphy. I will, first of all, ask Matthew to introduce the report as Cabinet Lead. I'll then ask officers if they've got anything to add. I will then once again ask the speakers from the audience before asking Cabinet colleagues, and then we will have an opportunity for those queries to be answered, and we will then come to Cabinet and an opportunity for their questions to be answered. The same rules apply in terms of timing and respect for one another's opinions. It's 6:15 and I have got 3 items, and we do need to conclude tonight's meeting by certainly within the hour. So if people could be brief and succinct, that would be very helpful. So if I can first ask Matthew if you'd like to introduce the item.
Thank you very much, Chair. Along with Councillors Jenny Brathwaite and Luke Murphy, I'm a ward councillor for the Central Hill estate and have been for the past 7 years. Since first going to the estate as a candidate in...
Excuse me, we're not gonna get anywhere if we can't actually hear what's being said. Okay? Okay, well, there's an opportunity, and I've just read out 6 names, as there was in the previous debate as well, okay? So I'm afraid, that's the only way we're going to be able to answer contributions. So I'll say once again, I'd like Matthew to be heard, because I think people want their opportunity. And I certainly know, although I perhaps won't agree with what they're going to say, but I know that the 3 people who are first up to speak have spent a lot of time on this issue. So I think we actually need to hear what people's contributions are. Matthew, thank you.
Thank you very much. Since first going to the estate in 2009, the experience of meeting residents has often been the same. I've been invited in and shown the damp, the condensation, the thick black mould that covers whole ceilings and walls, despite repeated attempts by residents and the council to remove it. Leaky roofs, backflowing sewage, dilapidated kitchens and bathrooms, and fears about asbestos. Residents have asked time and again whether, if and when their homes could be improved, and if not, why they would be stuck waiting to move on a transfer list where families in high priority can wait up to 8 years for another family-sized home because of the shortage of social housing in Lambeth. But we also know there is a major shortfall in our Lambeth housing standard budget, and there aren't enough homes to meet the needs of Lambeth's families, which is why we had to conclude in 2014 that we needed to confront the reality of the problems facing Central Hill and to start looking at what other options we had. By 2018, Lambeth will have invested over 6 years about £500 million in improving council homes in the borough. But in 2012, we were faced by a cut from the Conservative and Liberal Democrat government of the grant for decent homes investment in Lambeth by £100 million.
Councillor Briggs, I think, come on, you get lots of opportunities. Let's listen to Councillor Bennett, all right? Well, perhaps because it's the truth, but anyway.
Yeah.
Tim, if you want your contribution to be heard from the table tonight, I'd suggest that you keep quiet now.
I'm not surprised Councillor Briggs doesn't want to hear about the damage his party has done to social housing in Lambeth, but it will continue to go. We also... Sorry, Councillor Briggs, if you could wait. And after 2018, we know, following that £100 million cut from the Conservative government, that there will still be at least £99 million worth of work left to do to Lambeth estates, and that figure doesn't include the cost of any work that could be done on Central Hill. We also know that the government's decision in 2015 to cut rent by 1% every year for 4 years creates another £28 million shortfall in our budget, which translates into millions and millions less that we can borrow to invest in our homes over the next 30 years, and we have no certainty from the government on what rents will be after 2020. And again, the government's decision to force councils to sell council homes on the open market to fund the right to buy in housing associations will again cut the money available to invest in council housing in Lambeth. And the serious, well Tim, if you listen, you'll hear, the serious problems faced by residents with the quality and condition of their homes on Central Hill is directly affected, Councillor Briggs, by the amount of money available to spend on them. And the council commissioned independent stock condition evidence to look at the condition of homes alongside the council's own data. That showed the estate needs at least £18.5 million of investment, including £13 million in the next 5 years in 2015 numbers. When residents asked about the detail of those figures, we invited them to work with the independent expert appointed by tenants and leaseholder councils, whose view was that the costs could...
Please, can we just get through this, because otherwise I will be cutting contributions from the floor, and I don't want to do that, but I do want to get through this item, and we can all hear one another if people stop shouting from the back. Matthew.
Thank you. The view of the independent expert who reviewed those figures to support residents as we went through this consultation estimated that the costs, rather than being £18.5 million, could run as high as £40 million. This means that for every home that we could refurbish on Central Hill, there would be 3 or more council homes elsewhere in the borough that could not be refurbished. And with a constrained budget, we need to spend carefully and effectively and fairly to all of the 24,000 council homes and those families as possible. And refurbishment alone on this estate would not address many of the problems, particularly with design and access that residents face, particularly older or disabled residents. On that basis, the only way that refurbishment could stay on the table, and on that basis that we consulted, was that we don't know if or when it could be afforded or how long that work would have to be spread over. We also looked, as we went through, on infill and partial approaches to rebuilding. After lengthy consideration, these were also ruled out, as they did not resolve the central problem of improving residents' homes. Lastly, there was the proposal from ASH, the so-called Architects for Social Housing, as they call themselves. In early 2016, they...
Okay, can we keep it quiet? We have conflicting opinions, but we all would like to hear them. Okay? Thank you.
Please. I'm not smirking.
Okay. In 2016, Ash came to the estate saying they'd come up with a solution that would mean full refurbishment and no rebuilding. They claimed it was a fully worked up plan. They presented it to residents as a fully worked up plan, and not a word of that was true. After months and months of asking for the detail of their plan, they finally provided it later in the year. The Ash proposal, contrary to what they told residents, did not work. The homes were too small, they were built too close together, the walls and proportions were wrong, financially it didn't stack up, the homes wouldn't have passed planning, and it did nothing to improve the conditions of existing homes on the estate, while worsening the access problems by closing off staircases and closing off the ends of the blocks. Ash's proposals provided nothing but false hope to residents. It was a vanity project that wasn't architecture and did nothing for social housing. Last autumn, having considered all the proposals and tested them to see if they were workable, we put forward two options for consultation: refurbishment with all the uncertainty over funding that's been outlined, or full rebuilding with all the questions over timing and disturbance that are also well known. The estate, as I think we all know, was divided on this question. 65% of households responded to the consultation, which was carried out independent from the council. On rebuilding, it was supported by 49% of residents and opposed by 38% of residents, with a sharp division on the view from tenants and from leaseholders. A majority of tenants supported the proposal by 55% to 34%, while just 31% of leaseholders supported, with 51% against. And as the figures suggest, a lot of people remain unsure and unconvinced either way. This speaks a lot to the fact that this is undoubtedly a very tough decision in circumstances that are of nobody's choosing, but we still have to find a way forward which delivers for our residents. Rebuilding the estate will be a major undertaking, but practically it is the best way to guarantee our existing tenants a high-quality new home that meets their needs, and will also build hundreds of additional homes with priority given to local families in housing need. The Cabinet report sets out a range of possible options, all to demonstrate that rebuilding is a feasible and viable proposal that Cabinet can have confidence in tonight. We are not being asked as a Cabinet to endorse any particular proposal for rebuilding, but instead to leave that to the master planning process this decision would enable. This will mean that the residents of Central Hill will be able to choose the architects and development managers to work with them in designing their new homes and their new estate. It will be this process, together with planning, that will lead to the new Central Hill estate, not any decision tonight about numbers of new homes. The key guarantees that we adopted a few moments ago mean that everyone who wants to stay on Central Hill can do so. New homes will be larger, well built, adapted to residents' needs, and the additional homes will help address the housing crisis with more homes for local families. This will not involve any private developer and no sale of land. The alternative to this is the uncertainty of not knowing if or when refurbishment could be carried out. The alternative to this is to tell residents to put up with what they have at the moment and to hope that something better comes along at some uncertain point in the future. And neither as a local councillor for the estate or as Cabinet member could I sign up to that. I think this is the right decision for residents, with the certainty that we have, however large and difficult it is, and as it's been shown through the consultation, a large number of our tenants and overall more residents agree with that, and I ask Cabinet to support it as well tonight.
Thank you very much. Rachel, do you need to add anything to that at this stage? Good, okay, thank you. So if I can go back to Nicola, Karen and Victor, please. Nicola, would you like to start? Thanks.
Okay. So the estate regeneration programme began in 2012. Central Hill was included, it would seem, because of its land values. We actually saw that map. You didn't give it to us. We had to source it ourselves to find out. We were one of the lowest scoring estates, but we still got put in anyway. In December 2014, you held an event on the estate asking residents various questions. Would you like a new kitchen? Would the kids like a playground? And you recorded these responses on post-it notes. Little did our estate know that was the start of the official consultation programme. At no point did you tell them what you were considering. I did that in 2015, and I was called a liar by you. I was told that I was making it up, and none of these things were going to happen. Demolition wasn't an option. And look at us now sitting here, with demolition being the only option. The other option you kindly put in is do nothing. Yes, that's about right for Lambeth, our landlord. Do absolutely nothing. Now, I don't have long enough to explain to everyone in this room how the next 2 years of engagement processed working with Lambeth. But all I can say is thank you to the handful of residents, I think we ended up with 8, who worked for 2 years going through tons and tons and tons of documents, which I have on my kitchen table. You know, and then you didn't even provide us with half those documents. We had to go and get them ourselves. And in fact, I'd like to take you to an example when we asked about decanting. And you said, we haven't made up our mind yet. There's no documents relating to it. We're going to work on it. Morris, I can't remember his second name, who I asked this question, told me, that document doesn't exist, but I had it in my handbag with his name written on it. But to be honest, all of that is irrelevant. The 2 years that you have dragged our residents through, 2 years of uncertainty, 2 years of different key guarantees, because I have so many different key guarantee documents at home that I don't know which one is actually relevant anymore. But you did sort that out, so I thank you, because none of them are relevant anymore. You changed it, and we got access to those key guarantee documents 5 days ago. And you expected us to go through them, but we did, and we did in detail. And now we don't have any key guarantees. We have pledges, promises, overarching principles, the actual nitty-gritty, the things that mean stuff to our residents is in your mechanisms. And as we were told on Tuesday night, Sue Foster, and now tonight, you can change them at will. That is not acceptable. I'll give you some more examples. You told our leaseholders you would enter into early buybacks with them so that they could sell their homes whenever they liked and they could leave the estate. Now, we've got very, very limited buyback procedures available. In fact, it's now only in exceptional circumstances will you enter into a buyback, and that's after that leaseholder has to go cap in hand to you and explain why they want to move. That is not a free market. You also told tenants you can have a secure tenancy if you move. That's no longer in the principles and is now in the mechanisms and can be changed. But do you know what? We knew from the beginning that you would not be open and you would not be honest and you would not give what you should to the people on our estates. We knew that from the beginning. And you say to us on Tuesday, we now have to trust you. Trust you. I wouldn't trust any of you. I'd rather go to Brixton Prison and go and speak to a con than trust any of you. Also...
Nicola, can you start winding up, please?
No,
'Cause I want to bring
no,
the other two
I
people.
won't.
Yeah, and Matthew...
I will not wind up until I've had my say. You say it's going to cost £18.5 million to refurbish our estate. You say this was an independent survey requested by us. I never employed Martin Arnold. You did. Martin Arnold, who works all the time for Lambeth, he is not independent. He was not picked by us. And we did challenge his assumptions. But there was no mechanism within the resident engagement panel for us to do so. So you say we accepted them, and I'm telling you now, and you can put it on record, we never accepted the 18.5 million. And I'm going to point out something to you. I live in a house, a maisonette, but according to that survey, I need a door entry system that's going to cost £3,718. That's an exceptionally expensive doorbell. These costs have now risen to £40 million. Where's the evidence for that? None of this. We've never seen evidence of £40 million refurbishment costs. You haven't even put the 18.5 in the background papers. You expect us to believe these costs when we don't. And that's bad enough, but I haven't finished yet, don't worry. You say that you would need to spend this straight away, because we all knew new windows, new doors. You've just put doors on the properties. So what, we would need new doors again, new windows again. What we need is new roofs. What we need is a landlord that maintains the properties properly in the first place. And also, I'm going to talk about the so-called ash plans. Ash compiled an alternative for us that doubled the homes on the empty land. But you allowed no financial help, so we had to do that. And luckily for us, Ash did all their work for free. And you have just dismissed it. You said that it could be potentially viable to build on the empty land. Now let's just take a scenario. Actually give us the real refurbishment costs and then the real amount of homes we could build on the empty land, and let's see where we can go from there. That would be the least disruptive for our residents, who 25% of them are elderly. And what is this going to do to them when you force them out of their homes?
Okay, Nicola, I am going to try and... Oh, you finished? Great. I'm not going to need to stop. Right.
So
if you could then move on,
I'm
Karen.
passing
Thank
over to Karen now.
But you will need to turn your mic because you won't be able to hear her otherwise.
Right. My name is Karen Bennett. I'm just going to say, first of all, I've got a medical condition that affects my speaking and my breathing, so I would ask the forbearance of the Cabinet and allow me a little longer if that's necessary. So, as I say, my name is Karen Bennett. I'm a leaseholder on the Central... Can you hear me? Is that working? I'm a leaseholder on the Central Hill Estate. I've lived here since 2000, and I'm a member of the original steering group set up in July 2015 in order to engage with the Council in respect to the proposed regeneration scheme, but which was subsequently changed to the Resident Engagement Panel for reasons known only to Lambeth Council, but believed to be intended to alter and limit the level of engagement by the residents on the estate. I'm also Secretary of the Central Hill Residents Association. I would like to talk about the resident surveys. Is that still working? Yeah. I would like to talk about the resident surveys, especially as Matthew has talked at length about the level of support that Lambeth has allegedly received from tenants and leaseholders on the Central Estate. and also the test of opinion carried out by Lambeth Council and its appointed contractors over the last 2 years, the most recent by TCC, the campaign company. These have taken different formats, from asking residents, as Nicola said, to complete post-it notes at walk-in exhibitions, to door knocking and completing surveys on behalf of the residents. All the methods used have been questionable and the alleged results unsubstantiated. The most recent results given by Lambeth Council and published on the missive to residents informing them of the date of this Cabinet hearing, incidentally the 14th date that we've been given, was to say that the Council had contacted 307 households on the estate, and 49% of all of those residents support the regeneration scheme and demolition of the dwellings on the estate. The other published figure, following the most recent survey by TCC, claims that 55% of all council and currently secure tenants that were contacted as a proportion of the total 307 households favour regeneration and demolition. The Council also provided this figure for publication in a recent issue of the South London Press. It is completely inaccurate, and I will tell you why. The residents have conducted their own tightly controlled and fully substantiated survey of residents. In doing so, we identified their tenancy status and asked them to state their preferred option for the future of the Central Hill estate. Those options were refurbishment, full demolition, part refurbishment and part rebuild, repairs and improved maintenance. That was an option that we added. The first three were the options on the table when consultation began at the end of 2014, although the options to refurbish were subsequently removed, and the Council has consistently made it clear that the only option they are considering is full demolition. Our results show that of the 472 dwellings on the estate, approximately 10 have been identified as unoccupied. We contacted 322 households, which represents 70% of all occupied dwellings. Of those 322 households, 227 were secure tenants, 78 were leaseholders or freeholders, and 17 were private tenants. Of the total 322 households polled, a total of 254 were completely against demolition, preferring refurbishment or repairs and improved maintenance. This represents 78.8819875776%, or 79%, if you round it up, of all households polled. As the Council considered that they only really need to consult with tenants, we've broken down the tenant figures as well. Of the 227 secure tenants contacted, 177 were completely against demolition, representing 77.97 or 78% of all secure tenants. Not only do nearly 80% of all tenants and residents not support the regeneration project, but only 4.45% are in support of the regeneration project. Others,
and that can, but the specialist wrote that he will never go ahead unless I move out of that home, as it will reoccur again. I have about 2 other neighbors who are equally ill with other ailments. We have also been denied of new bathrooms and kitchen due over 3 years now that this regeneration plan has been going on. You can imagine the state of homes, while our fellow council counterparts all over the city are living in modern homes. Do please go ahead and do what you have to do to get us all out of this misery before sick tenants like me lose our life before our time. My doctor knows that she has been treating my ailment for the past 8 years since I moved into that home. The world is changing and we have to move along with it.
Thank you very much for that contribution.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, I think we need to listen to contributions in silence, and thank you very much for that one. Tim, I'm going to come to you next, and I am going to give you 2 minutes, okay? And I'm going to do the same with Luke.
First of all, you shouldn't be delegating these key guarantee decisions to officers. These residents have to know what these decisions are and what they're going to be. So you can't just delegate them. They may need to be scrutinised. Conservative opposition, we oppose this plan. We believe that people have rights, human rights, property rights, and that the law should protect everyone equally, whatever their background or income. So let's be clear, it's not a consultation for Labour councillors to make a decision and tell residents what to accept. You've already made a decision for them, so it's an insult to them to consult on your own preferred outcome. In summary, you want to, amongst other things, demolish people's homes, have residents pay much higher monthly rent, for them to lose their secure tenancies, to lose the right to buy their own home, and to be unable to move to most other council properties. A private sector landlord doing something similar would be called a rogue landlord. We now have a survey from residents we heard from that is a game changer, because it shows that 78% of residents do not want their homes demolished. Your survey, as with Cressingham Gardens, is not able to be challenged properly. All the evidence hasn't been provided, and therefore it's not worth the paper it's written on. I urge you to listen to the residents. If you halt this demolition and repair Central Hill, you will have full cross-party support. But you won't listen to residents because you believe that rights are something that you grant, and as the best and brightest and most virtuous, people's individual rights are less important than your power to do good, and that everyone should trust you, despite allowing Lambeth to become the 29th poorest borough in the country. It was only the Conservative Secretary of State, Sajid Javid, in the Ellsbury decision that forced you to improve your offer to residents. Yet even then, when you look at the detail of these so-called key guarantees, nothing is guaranteed. Everything is all spin and good intentions, so the offer is still basically, trust us, we know better than you. People don't trust you. I will have my say. People don't trust 2 minutes because you have a lot of saying we are building 1,000 council homes in your manifesto has always been more important than the inhuman reality that you are mostly building on top of people's homes that already exist. And I am told that council officers in Cannes are saying that Central Hill is open to private developer involvement. This is what your own officers are saying. So in summary, let me tell you what Conservative councillors would do. We would repair the award-winning, beautiful Central Hill estate, not demolish it. That is what we would do. We would reorganise the housing department, and like Wandsworth Council, we would bring in expertise for major works contracts, we would drive down costs to generate savings for spending on repairs, and we would use the proceeds from our right to part-buy plan to fund a proper regeneration of all the estates.
Thank you, Tim. Let's hope you never get elected. Never take power, because there's more than enough stuff in there that is completely unrealistic. But thank you for keeping to 2 minutes. Luke, could I ask you, as ward councillor, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Luke Murphy. I'm one of the ward councillors in Gypsy Hill. A decision to rebuild any estate should never be taken lightly. After all, we are not just talking about houses, but the homes and lives of many residents who live on the estate. That's why, since I was elected, unlike Councillor Briggs, I have spoken with many tenants and leaseholders who live on the estate about the future of Central Hill. As we have heard, not everyone supports the proposals, and some are understandably unsure. But many residents, both tenants and leaseholders, do support the plans. They do so because many of the homes on Central Hill are in an appalling condition.
Could we please keep quiet so we can hear all contributions? Luke.
And they recognise that rebuilding is the best way to secure decent and quality homes for everyone on the estate. They include an elderly brother and sister, tenants who live on Ridgeway. They support the decision because of the persistent mould in their home, which covers their walls, and they fear is affecting their health. Now elderly and infirm, they also feel the new properties will be better adapted to their needs. Or the parents on Oakwood Drive.
I'm going to say it one more time. Everybody else has been listened to quietly, by and large, and I'd like Luke to be heard as well. I think that's only fair. Luke.
Or the parents on Oakwood Drive who live there with their 2 teenage sons. They said that black mould constantly appears and spreads through their home, and no amount of repair work can remove it. They are desperate for the council to move forward with this decision so they can get a new, warm and damp-free home like many other residents on the estate. And their neighbours, a family who were forced to move from elsewhere on the estate because of persistent damp, and now unfortunately they face the same problem. I support these proposals because, like these residents, I believe it is the best way to secure decent and quality homes for everyone living on the estate. I know and I hope the council accepts that the process to get to the decision today has been long, too long, and that for many residents it has been very frustrating. The council needs to learn from what has not worked well. But I believe that the key guarantees have been improved in consultation with residents. They are and remain crucial to providing tenants and leaseholders with certainty over the next few months and years. I know some residents have reservations about how committed the council is to the key guarantees. They should know that I and the local councillors are fully committed to them and will hold the council to account every step of the way. I do expect the council to redouble its efforts to provide the same assurance to all residents. I also want the council, I'm coming to an end, I also want the council to move as swiftly as possible if a positive decision is taken today to support residents in their choices, tenants and leaseholders alike, whether they want to move or stay on the estate. But I would ask that the Cabinet agree with the recommendation before it today, because I believe it is the best way to secure decent and quality homes for everyone living on Central Hill.
Thank you very much for those contributions. I would ask if officers could come to the table and answer some of the points that were raised. I think out of the 6 contributions there were a few questions, although a lot that was raised clearly was opinion. So what I'd identified was, I think there was a question around buybacks. There was a question around the consultation. And there was certainly some issues around finances and certainty, which I think were the three key points.
Surveys that you haven't included in the report. Where are they? Let's talk about them.
Sorry, can you just pipe down for a minute? We've got 3 key questions there that I'd like you to answer. Yep.
So in terms of buybacks, we're very aware that we've had many conversations over the past months around a buyback programme specifically for Central Hill. We obviously needed a Cabinet decision in order to move the buyback programme forward, so subject to a decision this evening, officers will be able to progress that. We do have a budget for the next financial year which can be used for priority buybacks, and at the same time, concurrently to that, we're working up a business plan for a wider programme of buybacks that will enable the council to purchase leasehold properties on Central Hill for people who want to sell and move off the estate.
Could you just identify, because that point was made several times, priority, how we determine priority, because I did get some sense of impatience around that. Yep.
So there will be, we will send out expressions of interest to homeowners. We already have homeowners who are in contact with the rehousing team, and they will assess them on a case-by-case basis as to whether they are deemed a priority case for buyback.
The consultation, I think, would be very helpful. If you're addressing that, yep.
Yeah, absolutely. We fully understand and fully recognise that the process that's taken to get to this point in terms of a decision has been longer than we had desired. The other estates that we've taken through the estate regeneration programme, we have been able to come to a decision quicker. This is a larger estate than the other estates, and more complexities in terms of the nature of the estate sitting on a hill and so on and so forth. And it's been incredibly important for us to get this right in terms of coming to this decision, and to also go through that process and making sure that we've taken on board the residents' views through the TCC survey, and that is part of the reason why it has just taken so long to get to this point in time. But we fully understand that it is longer than it's desirable. Going forwards, we are absolutely committed to make sure that we fully engage with the residents going forwards, to make sure that we sort of get that engagement wider and deeper, to get sort of more people involved in the process. The next stage immediately would be to finish off the procurement process for a master planning team. We have got this process quite well worked through so far with the other estates, where we involve the residents through that selection process, through exhibitions, through interviews, the residents involved all the way in part of that decision process, and it has worked very well on the other estates and gone down very well with the residents. And we will be taking that forwards and taking that lesson forward and moving forwards the whole process, getting the residents involved in the design and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Rachel? Okay, Rachel. You were going to talk, well, I'm assuming it was you to talk about the finances. And the question, I think, in a sense, it was behind, I think, Victor's point. Okay, that's you again, Julian.
Yes, I'll take that. The key issue with the finances is that having made the decision around the key guarantees, we know a much better idea of what the cost of those key guarantees are as part of the process. And importantly, as we go through the master planning process, we will work up the designs and the viability of the estate on the basis of understanding that underlying cost of needing to honour those key guarantees. So both the key guarantees and the viability of the estate can be certain going forwards in terms of that process. So it's making sure that we bring those together, and that the key guarantees represent an integral part of the viability of understanding the development of the estate going forwards.
Final question was around the surveys, which was shouted out to me. Could someone answer that point, please? Yep. Do you want? I'm assuming people want the question answered. Yep. Okay. Well, then, if we could ask Rachel to answer it. Okay.
There's nothing particularly secret about the survey information. If people want that, that's freely available.
Right. Thank you. Sorry. Well, I think if yeah, go on.
Obviously, we'd be happy to have a look at any survey information that tenants have done themselves. If people want to make further comments and give views that we aren't already aware of, we're more than happy to have a look at them.
Sorry, hold on. I think I confused that. I thought you were talking about surveys of properties for a moment, which is how Rachel first answered. You were talking about the survey. I know what you were talking about now, because you've just clarified it. But Rachel, no, I'm sorry. Sorry. No, I think the point that Rachel just made was that we are more than happy to have that information shared and to go through it. It's very difficult, I think, without that information to really comment more meaningfully on it. That's the point, okay? Okay, I'm now going to ask Cabinet colleagues would like to sorry, Mo. Okay. Karen, can we just let other people speak, because otherwise we're not going to have an opportunity to hear from Cabinet. So I saw Mo, and I saw Jack, and I saw Jenny.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the question of buybacks, and just looking at page 30 and 31 of the report, just so I understand correctly, the capitalisation for the buybacks, it's part of the £20 million upfront cost that will be incurred. Is that correct in my understanding? If that, okay, I'm shaking my head. In that case, then, has there been an amount that's been identified? If not, then is there any reassurance as to when that could possibly happen? Regarding the buybacks, then, if the capitalisation amount isn't considered enough, can we have reassurance that the rules won't be changed at least, and then it's up to the council to find additional funds as required? Regarding the viability, then, the various scenarios that are outlined on page 30, can I just get reassurance that these aren't optimistic in any kind of way, that they aren't, it wouldn't take much to make the net value negative in any way? Because I see, for example, the inflation, consumer inflation rates described as 0.9%. I think the current amounts increased significantly. So in light of that, I mean, how much inflation, say, would it take to get these net values to become negative? And then so a general question about the just rigour that's been applied to this financial model here, and the effect that could possibly have on, say, capitalising Homes for Lambeth as well.
Jack, Councillor Hopkins.
I just want to ask a quick question around, and Julian, it was to your point. So I'm a councillor, next door ward, South Lambeth Estate and Knights Walker in close vicinity, and I've been close to them. And as you say, the master planning process there has gone fairly well. Given that there is certain opposition, certainly within this room, how is the master planning process going to be altered? Not least for the comment earlier that was made around for residents who might be suffering mental ill health or have disability or specific personal life circumstances. And can you talk us through how that master plan process will work in practical terms?
Jenny, Councillor Brathwaite.
Chair, as a local ward councillor, I'd like to make a statement. Is that going to be possible?
To be within 2 minutes, Jenny,
right,
because we're really butting up against...
But do bear with me, Chair. Look, central to this decision, to my mind, is people, and actually providing our residents with accommodation which is warm, meets their needs, doesn't leak, doesn't actually have mould, is free of damp, is free of asbestos, and doesn't actually have dirty sewage water going into their property. I've been a councillor for 7 years, and I can tell you that the emotional stress suffered by our residents who have to live in these conditions which cannot just be repaired because they are inherent defects, and that means no matter what you do, those defects will always be with you. I have visited. I have visited.
1 minute, Jenny, wait a minute. 1 minute. We really do need quiet if people are going to be heard, okay? We've had that before from speakers who've come up to the table. I'd ask you to show the same respect to speakers on this side of the table. Jenny.
Can I continue, Chair? I have visited a number of properties over the years, and I have been asked by some of the residents that I saw last week to mention this, that the mould, the actual condensation is like a cancer spreading through their property, and it can only be cured by regeneration. And I am bringing that message to you. And if you listen to those tenants who want regeneration, which you heard from Mrs. Adams, rather than shout over and intimidate them, then you will understand the need and why they support regeneration. I also think it's an issue.
It is fair. She has 2 minutes.
I have a different point of view.
So please, shush.
Chair, I have a different point of view which ought to be heard because it represents a sizable number of residents on that estate, and they should be listened to. For me, as a black councillor, it is also an issue of equality. The majority of residents who are council tenants and on our waiting list are black and ethnic minority. They have to face discrimination and the rise in the cost of private accommodation. So their only realistic option is the council rented property. And we are trying to meet their needs, and it's important that we do so. So, thank you, Chair. I can no longer talk anymore.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny. Shush, please. I've got one last question. Jim, Councillor Dixon.
This issue of how we understand tenant and resident opinion on the estate does seem very important. I wonder if officers could just set out a little bit more the methodology undertaken in the survey results we have before us, so an independently undertaken survey to a methodology. Could you just unpack that a little bit, because that does contrast, no matter different from a survey in which your tenants and in which your neighbours and other tenants on the estate knock on your door and ask you a question. It really has to be independent. I wonder if you can reassure us about that.
I've got 3 questions. Okay, I've got 3 questions there, I think, in those contributions. The first was around the finances, and Mo made some quite detailed comments there, if you could come back on that. Secondly, Jack referred to and used as comparison some of the other estates and the master plan process, and what does it mean if we go ahead with this. And the third one is Jim's, which I think perhaps starts to get to the heart of what some of the members of the audience were also shouting, which is around survey and how the consultation was done. And I think if we can touch on that, and then, as I said earlier on, if the information that you got as a survey could be fed through to the council, very willing to look at that as well. Okay? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up first on Councillor Sedat's question about the 20 million upfront costs. Sorry, I misunderstood that question first time round, and yes, it does include the money for the buybacks and taking the project forward. I think it's set out on paragraph 2.8 of the report, so apologies if any confusion on that. You did ask also if the viability scenarios were sensitive enough, and I think that's a really good question. We've only included the, I think, 8 or 9 scenarios in here. We tried to make them as realistic as we possibly could to indicate what implications changing certain assumptions would have on the project. We're fairly confident that they do cover all likely eventualities. I think you then asked a question about the implications for Homes for Lambeth. Yes, we will be coming back in, we think, May with a report, a more detailed report on Homes for Lambeth, and obviously all the assumptions for our projects, our schemes, will be built into the business planning for Homes for Lambeth.
Okay, thank you. And briefly then on the other 2 points, master planning and the consultation.
So, in terms of the master planning process, as I mentioned earlier, we would first off involve the residents in the process of selecting the master planning team. And we've done that on other estates by means of having an exhibition where all the tenderers for that master planning process have come and exhibited. Everybody in the estate has had the opportunity to participate in that process. We've done training. We've done training for the residents to enable them to participate properly within the interview process, and then there's been a selection of residents who've been at the interview and participated fully, asked questions, and we've allowed the residents to lead the way in terms of the types of questions that have been asked. It's been a very interesting process, and as I understand it, the residents involved have got a lot out of that. So we've gone through all that process. Once the master planning team is involved, there would be a period of time where they're doing survey work, where we can start engaging more with residents, finding out how the residents actually want us to engage with them. That's, first off, rather than dictating to them how they should be engaged with, we want to actually go to the residents and find out from them how best to engage with them. And then we'll make sure that there are a whole variety of ways we do that. There'll be exhibitions, there'll be going to people's homes, there'll be the resource centre where we can have the design team working at the resource centre for people to drop in. There's lots of methods and ways ways that people can be involved in that process.
And then just touching on the consultation and the methods used, and I think that's pertinent given there's obviously a counter survey.
So in terms of the independent survey, we procured an external consultancy that's a specialist in this area. We sat down with them to work through what the methodology should be to make sure that it is properly independent, and worked through with them and worked up a questionnaire with them that allowed people to freely express their views. And then we made sure that the people...
Sorry, we are pushed for time. We could just not answer this question. But I think if we are going to answer it, it might be worth everybody here listening to it.
And then we made sure that people who were actually doing the survey were properly briefed, and then they carried out the survey, and they were wholly in control of all the survey responses and analysing the survey results.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Colleagues, we've come to the end of the questions and observations about this item. Matthew, there's no final comments you want to make. So are we content to approve the recommendations in the report? We are. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your contributions this evening. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution this evening. We're now moving on to the third item on the agenda, and that is Article 4 direction, change of use from offices to residential. Catherine. Okay. Well, it was agreed. Just heard it here. Yeah. Okay, if we could make... I did actually just say, are we prepared to move to the recommendations in the report? And people said, yes, they were. Okay? I'm afraid you didn't. Fine. You might not have heard that because there was a lot of shouting. But that's, I'm afraid, what I did say. Okay, if we can move on to item 3. And Jack, you are introducing this.
Okay, so... Under the... can you hear that? Okay. Well, no one's listening. Okay, so under the previous Lib Dem Tory government... shall I speak again? Okay, so we have to make this decision. Can people hear me? Okay, so if colleagues around this end of the table can hear me, and any colleagues in the corner, you can? Okay, right, fine. So under the previous Lib Dem Tory government, permitted development was extended, which has meant... Yes.
Change, oh thank you, yeah, we'll need that. Direction, Article 4, direction for change of use. Are we happy to agree that? Agree. I'm sorry about that, Catherine. I apologise. And I think we should defer. Can we defer the 4th item? Okay, end of meeting. Thank you.